yeah, hi everyone. First of all, as a person whose 4 years of college was binge watching Korean drama, so I really related with all the signs and all the letters everywhere, so I don't understand anything, but I love it. So after the talk, if you want to talk about accessibility, or if you also want to teach me some Korean words and some phrases, do come and find me somewhere. So yeah, thank you so much for introducing me, and I would start first by praising the organizing team. It's very well done. As a person who talks a lot about accessibility, and accessibility is so dear to me, I really like all the accessibility things which have been taken care of in this conference, so it's amazing. JSConf Korea is like, it has always been very close to my heart because they have always taken care of accessibility. So yeah, I love this conference, first of all. Thank you. And today I'm going to talk about accessibility in Svelte beyond compiler warnings. A bit of introduction. So I'm working as a front-end consultant at Passionate People in Amsterdam. I'm a Cloudinary Media Developer Expert, Google Developer Expert, Microsoft MVP, and Women Tech Makers Ambassador. If you would like to connect with me on LinkedIn, you can connect on Anuradha15 or on Twitter at miracle_404. The topics which we are going to cover today, we will start with introduction of accessibility, and we will see that how Svelte has maintained the accessibility first approach. Then we will see how we can solve the accessibility issues beyond the compiler warnings. I'll also share some of the useful tools and resources which will help you learn more about accessibility. So before we start, also all the slides are here. You can scan the QR code or go to the tiny URL JSConf-kr-a11y. But I will also share this later on the Twitter, but still if you want to follow along, you can still go ahead and access the slides. And on this slide, there is also URL for Code Sandbox, where I have some of the small demos. The code is here so that you can find it easy if you want to take a look on your laptop. Okay. So yeah, I'll move. So let's start with accessibility. What is accessibility? Accessibility, which is also neuronamed as A11Y. Here 11 refers to the number of letters between A and Y. It means making resources and services usable by everyone, regardless of their disability. So why should we care about accessibility? Because whatever we are building, we build it for the user, right? So the end goal is that the user should be able to use our websites. We do not always know what our users are going through. As per World Health Organization, around 15% of world population, and it translates to around 1 billion people around the world, they live with some form of disability. So there are different types of disability like visual, auditory, motor, and cognitive. And since there are different types of users with different types of disabilities, they use the web in different ways. So they don't always use it by conventional mouse. They can use different types of devices and technologies which are called assistive technologies. Some of them are keyboard. So some people use just keyboard to navigate the web. Then there is something called screen reader or narrators or voiceovers on different devices. And then there is also multiple ways, right? So there is one called braille display. So here the output is inputted on something called a braille display, and you can touch on those and understand what is there on the screen. So these are just a few of many different assistive technologies. So users use it in different ways. So we need to ensure that whatever we are creating is accessible, so that no matter what device or assistive technology they are using, they should be able to use our web properly. Here I would like to mention one thing. So Anna mentioned that most of the performance and metrics and resources, they are created like mostly keeping privileged user in mind. I mean, it always feels so similar for accessibility, because whenever we are creating, we often ignore all different types of disabled users, and whatever we create is mostly focused on a conventional user who might see and who is able to use their mouse, and that is the biggest hurdle to the web today. Okay, so we are making the web inaccessible. And how? We are not using proper coding guidelines, we are not using the latest standards, which is Semantic HTML, we are focusing just on mouse-centric action, and when we are testing, we do not often test from accessibility perspective. So at this point, I would just like to ask, how many of us take care of accessibility when we are coding or creating websites and applications? Raise your hands. There are a few, I like it. Just pat on your backs because yeah, you are doing great. And the people who didn't raise their hands, it's okay. I mean, we learn someday. So let today be the day when you start thinking from accessibility perspective, right? We all start someday. So this is like one of the tweets, but it says that how web is inaccessible and how it makes our users feel. So it says that today my dad cried over the phone. He wanted 1 week where he could use his computer without my help. He is blind. And every inaccessible web page tells him, you aren't welcome in this world. So if you don't know whether your website or application is accessible, it is not. So let's start learning. So it's just one of the examples, but this is how our users feel. They feel unwelcome if they are not coming across the websites, they are accessible. So Svelte, when Svelte was created, it was created from an accessibility first mindset, which is very nice, and I really like the way they have incorporated the compiler warning. So if you write something and if compiler can detect it, you will get some nice errors there, some nice squiggly lines which says that, hey, this might not be accessible. So some of the warnings are like they take care of all the automated tests which we can find out in automated tests, like all text for images. If that's missing, they will give you error. If they are missing attributes like href is required for anchor, language is required for a document, if your icons are labeled properly or not, tab order, autofocus, etc. So there is actually a whole, if you go to Svelte documentation, I think everyone can read this, right? Whatever is on the screen, I guess. So this is a documentation from Svelte, and if you go and search for Ali, you will find all the different errors by Svelte. So whatever they use it for accessibility warnings. It is pretty nice read if you want to read it, but otherwise these are some of the errors which you will find, like and sorry I don't use dark mode, I hope I'm still a developer. But yeah, these are the snippets taken where they will show you error when you are coding. So they will not let you like not proceed, but they will show you that it's an issue and we can fix it. These are very nice. Now, what if you create something and you do not find these compiler warnings? What does that mean? Does that mean that your website is accessible? So it's not, right? So compilers can only catch as much issues. There are multiple ways if dynamic nature come into picture, like we are using JavaScript we use mainly for introducing dynamic nature, and then those can no longer be captured by compiler. And even if like we are into different app modes, so there are different files which we use. So if code in one file is dependent on content in other file, then a compiler won't be able to catch it properly if it's accessible or not. So let's see some of the ways in which we can solve the issues which are beyond compiler warnings. You might not find these in compiler warnings, but these are also very important and to make sure that our websites are accessible. So first of them again is using semantic HTML. Semantic HTML is like very, very important. I cannot stress it enough. Most of the errors which you find that can be eliminated if we use proper semantic HTML. So the first of them is page structure. So structure of the page is very important and it is used as landmarks. So when we are using assistive technologies, these are used in landmarks which are shown to the user, and user can understand properly what content is on the page. So some of the important tags are header, main, navigation, footer, aside, etc. And these are used for seamless navigation by assistive technology. We will see an example just in a while. So we can use these to define our major sections of the page instead of just using div and span. Then heading levels. Heading levels are again very important. There are 6 heading levels, H1 from H6, H1 being most important. And these are also used to create a structural outline of the page. And they are similar to what you can think is like table of content. If you go to a blog or somewhere, you can navigate them properly using table of content. Now these heading levels are kind of table of content for assistive technology users and for everyone. And also a very nice good practice is that we shouldn't be skipping level. Like after H1, we directly shouldn't use H5 or something. The levels are there for a reason. And one of the very common errors which we see is that people use the heading tags for styling. So if some text you have to show in bold and bigger letters, you go and use maybe H2 or H3, but no, heading has a specific purpose. If we want to just use styling, then use a style for it. Do not use headings for styling our content. Okay, so before we go here, I like to show in the code sandbox. So basically, okay, show of hands in the back if you cannot see properly. So if you cannot read this, just show your hands and I will make it bigger. Okay, I think everyone can see it then. So yeah, so here, this is just a very, very simple, like very plain, such as without styles website. So here what I have seen, so you can see some code text here. Now I have just used divs, like I did not use any structured code. It's just div. I have a div with a section, then a div with, which is intended to be actually a footer, but this is just a div, and basically this shouldn't be there. I didn't do it properly, but yeah. And when you see it, like it shows proper how I want it to be: a header, some text, and then a footer, some text, and then a footer in the back, right? But let me start the voiceover. So the thing I want to show here is the landmarks. Okay, it's acting up, but it's okay. Yeah. So specifically the screen reader users, they do not go ahead and start listening to everything that is on the page. They have some ways in which they can navigate the websites, and these are called rotors. So like I'm currently on Mac and using the voiceover, and if I press Control Option U, you can see some rotors come up. Now landmarks is one of the ways in which they can navigate, but now you can see that the landmarks is empty. There is no landmark on this page. There are some form controls, there are headings, heading level 1 and heading level 2 we have, so these are there. So it is not very accessible because we are not using proper HTML structure. What we can do is we can instead, okay, use the structure, and maybe I'll just comment this out. Okay. And I did something. Let me comment this code. Okay, let's start. Yeah. So now if we go ahead and see, if I use the same rotor, we can see that there will be different landmarks. Okay, and we go to voiceover again. Control Option U, Chrome is not responding, and my Twitter keeps coming up, I don't know why, but yeah. Yeah, so there are now landmarks. So if someone directly wants to go to main, they can go via this, or if someone wants to go to, any content, basically, this is like the footer. So they can directly be navigated to that part, and this is a very good way to structure. And I think I should have my headings. Where are the headings? Okay, yeah. So the headings, these if you see the code, basically I wanted to have this as an example of keyboard accessibility, and then these are some of the sub examples of it, like they are the part of it. So they should have been inside it as a heading, but since I just use a div with class names, so it didn't show up. So we can just use our headings. So if we use headings for those, we can see that they come properly now there, and you can read more about that. So basically the contents are big. In this example, I will just close this tab, but yeah. Links, I think it's not here. Okay. So also we can see that navigating with these screen readers or assistive tech is not fun. So that is one more reason to make them better so that people can navigate our code easily, like our websites easily. Okay. Here are headings, links, landmarks, form. Well, if your demo doesn't go wrong, then is it really a demo? But anyways, there should have been a headings tab. I'm not oh, okay, I get it. Sorry. I should be showing my example. What am I doing? Ah, glad I got it. Sorry. Let's open the voiceover. Now it should be. Okay. So this is the web page. I was trying to do the code sandbox page, not trying to navigate the code sandbox, but yeah. So here we are. So we see the headings, like it tells you it's H1. So these are two H2s, and then in keyboard accessibility I have 3 points. So these are here. I can enter and directly go there. So it provides for better navigation, better understanding of what is on our page and so on. Then we have keyboard accessibility. Keyboard accessibility means whatever we are creating, all the content should be accessible, and also they should be operable by our keyboard. So there are different elements which we want users to take some action on, like there are form input buttons, like different types of form controls, buttons, anchors, and so on. So again, when we use semantic HTML here, like we use the normal input tags, button tags, anchor tags, they will provide out of the box keyboard accessibility. We don't have to write any extra code, but if we write some, like using div or spans, which are non-semantic HTML, then we need to write extra code to make them keyboard accessible. So we need to ensure that whatever we are creating, they can be accessed by keyboard, they can be tabbable when the keyboard is getting used, they should be focusable, and we can operate on them, like when we press enter or space bar, the action which is supposed to happen on that control, that happens. And also that they are announced properly by screen readers. So what I mean by that is, for example, there is here we have button. So on click it says that, okay, say hi or something. So maybe I say, maybe something happens, right? I click it, it happens. When I go via tab, it still will happen, right? So it happens. Now if we had used like, so this is okay when we have a button. Sometimes I do realize that we create some complex components, and then you can no longer use the native elements because we don't have a native HTML element for it. Then we use a combination of different HTML elements we have. So in that case also you can use the bind properties and make sure that they are keyboard operable. How we can do, let's say it was a div instead of a button, which shouldn't be there. It's a very bad practice. But in that case, since we are telling this that it should happen only on click, when you use the keyboard, it won't allow it. So for that, you will have to bind extra, and you have to say that, hey, whatever is happening on click, I also want it to happen on key down, and so on. So again, you shouldn't use div for buttons, but if there is a complex component where you need to add the keyboard accessibility, you need to add those extra key bindings so that they are also operable by a keyboard. So yes, there's that. Then form accessibility. Whenever we are creating form are a very important part of all our websites and applications. We can use it to provide some information or get some information from the user, right? So some of the important places there are providing, labeling it properly, labeling your forms properly, and ensuring the feedback is understood by the users. And yeah, so for example here, so in Svelte, if you don't write a label for, it will show you error that, hey, you need to label your forms. But if you write a wrong label name, they will not give that as a compiler warning because they have no way to test it, right? So again, the limitation of compiler. So we need to ensure that we have properly labeled all our input. Most importantly is that whatever feedback we are giving, that should be to all the users. For example, here, let's open the voiceover here, but I think you won't be able to hear it, but yeah, you can see it here, whatever will be said. So let's say maybe something I write, okay, and I say hi. Now a text here appears, right? So in form normally we give feedback. If there's error or a success message, we give a feedback. Now this error message, this message appeared, but it was not announced to the user. So if the user is just using screen reader, they won't understand that what happened on the screen because they won't get that message. So what we can do is, for that, a very important thing is like we can say here, okay, I need to stop this. Yeah. So you need to ensure that we say that, okay, there should be a ARIA live. I don't think it's, yeah, I like polite, and the role of status. So we need to provide HTML role of status and ARIA live to it, and then what will happen is that again those important messages which we want to deliver to our users, they should be ARIA live so that the users can understand. So now if I have my voiceover on and again I say, okay, maybe, and I used the button, okay, never mind, but I click. So if you see this text box here, hi Anuradha, so this is what is being announced to the user. So this was just announced to the user because we used ARIA live. So this is very important, otherwise the users will miss on what information is on the screen. So we need to be announcing all the live reasons to our users, and we just saw an example of using it using ARIA live and HTML role. Then respecting the user device settings, there are certain settings which users do on their devices. For example, some users might not want to see animation as much. So there is a setting called prefers reduce motion that they use, and which ensures that they do not see much of animation. Then there are color schemes like dark, light, so on. So we can use these device settings. So for example, here let's see an example for animation right now. So this is the image, and I think I had a yeah. So I just added a simple animation here. Yeah. So a simple animation. Now in Chrome DevTools there is a very nice feature. So wherein I think Command Shift. Okay. So if we open the DevTools, and we can here say Command Shift P, and we can emulate for all the user device settings. So for example, I want to emulate the user who prefers a reduced motion. So I did that, but the animation is still showing on. So this is a very subtle animation, but there could be very big animations, and they might be very troubling for the user if we do not respect their settings. So how we can do that is, we should not be adding animation directly. What we can do is we can use something called a media query, which is prefer reduce motion, and then if the user has no preference, then go ahead and add the animation. So if we use this, and now since it was already set, so it just stopped the animation. Now if I go ahead and I say that, okay, the user can see animation, so there is no emulation, then the animation again started working. So basically we can use these different media queries to respect the user device settings. Then usability, there are some of the important things that we need to keep into mind when creating our websites, is how usable they are to the user. Like the tab order should be proper. So when using CSS, we have like flex and grid, and we can do anything on our website. Like we can write something on the bottom and make it appear on top and so on. But if we should also test with tabbing, that when we tab, the order is same as the user sees on the screen. The alt text, now the compiler and the automated test can check if all text is present or not, but they will not test if the alt text is proper or not. So this is something that we need to ensure that, okay, whatever we are writing, will it make sense to the user. Hover and focus. So whenever we are hovering on button and all, so like user should know that basically for focus, like when they are tabbing, the outline should be visible here. So many times for styling purpose, we just go ahead and say outline none. Now if the keyboard user taps on it, they won't understand which button or anchor tab is currently visible, currently active. So we need to have proper focus styling for that. Then color contrast. Color contrast is also very important. This won't be caught much in our automated test, but we need to ensure that the color contrast is proper for all the users, whatever content we are providing. Then I would just like to list some of the tools which we can use for testing. First, just ditch your mouse and use your keyboard and test all the websites that you are building. So you can do it even today. Screen readers, it will take some time to understand how to use screen readers, but it's worth investing some time into understanding and that testing with screen readers. Then there are different browser tools and extensions that you can use. Also there are automated tests which we can write, some of the lintings which we can use. So some of the important browser tools which I would like to mention are, first of all, DevTools everywhere. These are really nice. So we just saw an example of these DevTools. So I want to highlight few things. One of the things is accessibility pane. It will be maybe normally invisible, so you can go to the right and check on it, but go to accessibility pane and then we can go and check for any element. So for example, this I converted to div, right? So now it has, its role is generic, it's no longer a button and so on. So here you can check all the information about your any node in your website. So it's a very good tool to know. Then there is Lighthouse, of course. So in Lighthouse you can go ahead and click on accessibility and analyze page load, and it will show you some errors. And the same is for Axe DevTools. So basically Lighthouse works on Axe DevTools itself. So you can go to Axe. I really like Axe DevTools a lot because here you can scan and get a very nice information, and also links where you can read more about that error. So yeah, these are some of the things. Emulation, we just saw how we can emulate reduce color preference and reduce motion. We can emulate lots of things via that. So if I go Command Shift P, emulate, you can emulate many things, prefers color scheme and different types of things like emulating different kinds of color blindness and so on. So it's also a very nice tool to emulate those and see how our website is looking when accessed by different kinds of users. Then we saw Axe DevTools. Wave is another a very nice extension. So it gets installed as an extension, and we can just go ahead and right click on a website and say wave this page. It will reload and provide some good information about the page and structure and so on. So it's again a very nice tool if you would like to install and check your websites with it. So to summarize, so zero compiler warnings will not mean that your website is fully accessible. So ensure that apart from automated tests, we are also doing manual tests and really making sure that our websites are accessible. We should create and test everything that we do with accessibility in mind. So I have an action item for you all, which is that if you learn something today, do pass on the learning and let's spread the awareness. I think that's the main thing which is holding us from making accessible websites, is the awareness. Once we realize it, of course we will make accessible websites. So yeah, these are like where there is a feedback form. If you want to give feedback for my talk, you can go ahead, scan this and give me a feedback on that page. And with that, thank you.